Hello to everybody. The Capitol Hill Monitors and Montgomery Amateur Radio Club here in Maryland are proud to present Andrew Logan to talk to us about tracking DC's helicopters. Andrew is a DC native, broadcast technician, and investigative developer. He has launched the Twitter handle @HelicoptersOfDC as a clearinghouse for all things chopper related. His Twitter account now has over 7,700 followers who share photos and information on helicopters they have spotted in the air over DC. So here to tell us more about his helicopter avocation is Andrew Logan. Over to you, Andrew.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be with your group. Again, thank you, Alex. As she said, my name is Andrew Logan, a DC native. Here's some of my day job. I have coordinated many frequencies, but frequency they were in the 470 to 600 megahertz bandwidth. So recently I've been getting down into lower band activity. I'm not ham licensed yet, but it's definitely something of interest to me. So here's the problem. It started in 2020 for me. Although it's been ongoing for a long time over the DC area. We're all kept up late night by helicopters. Plane tracking sites, that includes FlightAware, Radar Box, Plane Finder, and the one I would recommend on top of all of those is ADSB Exchange. They're great, but they don't offer you historical data, and there are a good number of omissions. Some of those are for profit to the people who operate those sites. They omit certain operators, and others we'll talk about. A huge number of people are on Twitter looking for this information, and we're tweeting in the middle of the night. And then I also realized that even if people saw a helicopter, they frequently couldn't tell you who the operator was. And there's actually data from the Metro Washington Airport Authority to corroborate that a vast number of noise complaints are unattributed or falsely attributed. So to that mission, we started with an ADSB bot. So this would just tweet periodically activity from the ADSB Exchange API. To go a little into ADSB background, if you're not fully versed, this is something that really took hold in 2020 as commercial operators were largely required over Class B and C airspace to have these transponders. And it transmits on 978 or 1090 megahertz. There are a few different flavors of it that went back, and I'm not going to go into all that detail, but it's unencrypted, and it's can be received from aircraft to aircraft, aircraft to ground station like DCA, or totally legally aircraft to ground station like a Raspberry Pi on the roof of your house. So here's a graphic to kind of show you that. All those different ways you can receive it. There's also some satellite activity that we don't work with. But there is a big exception to this that is important in the DC area, which is that military and police aircraft are exempted from using these transponders when performing sensitive government missions for national defense, homeland security, intelligence, or law enforcement purposes. So that means you don't get any Air Force, Air Force 1st Helicopter Squadron. You don't get any Army. You don't get any National Guard. In rare occasions, they'll turn it on. I'm not sure what the thought is. They're throwing you a bone sometimes. You'll see the Coast Guard. You'll never see Marine One. So for us to be able to educate the DC area about the operators, we really needed more information. So to that end, we started something called CopterSpotter in October 2020. This is a user-submitted system on Twitter. You can see what it looks like. Here's a spot in the lower right. A bit of an overachiever here. He's included 4 photos, but the photos are not required. He's also provided a type, UH60, which is not required. But what is required is the location. So you can say, there's a helicopter over my location. It's the middle of the night. We will reply to that so that it hits our public feed so that everybody can see this is where a helicopter has been spotted and mapped. Of course, you know how the human brain works. If you want to get people to do things reliably, you have to make it a game. So we give people 2 points when they submit with a photo and 1 point without a photo. And believe me, it has spurred on some healthy competition, which we love. In 2021, that amounts to 10,000 spots. And several days, we're near 100 spots a day, which is pretty awesome. Tuesday, most popular, mostly during the day for our group. And then I don't expect you to be able to read all the parts of this chart about the operators, but what is important is our annual report just came out, 2021.CopterSpotter.com. And what we found is that the proportion of the operators in this chart is roughly proportional to what the Government Accountability Office report for 2020, the previous year, found, which is that it's largely military aircraft over the DC area. And for the GAO or the FAA, they're also not able to track this. So in a lot of ways, we're breaking new ground here. Post that, we kind of wanted more information because in the middle of the night, helicopter, you still don't know what it's doing. And there's a fair amount of variability when you see a Black Hawk. You don't know if it's National Guard, FBI, Army, or Borders and Customs Patrol also has H-60s. So like that's a big one. So we decided we wanted to capture and transcribe radio calls and find a way to bring that data onto the platform in an easily readable way. A lot of you won't be surprised this also is a Raspberry Pi and a software-defined radio, RTL SDR, using some excellent open source software called RTL SDR Airband. I can talk about that more in the questions, but the reason this was selected specifically is that it was the best way to split by silence so that you'd only get an individual call. And that was to create a file to go to Twitter. So when a new file is created, it screenshots ADSB Exchange and uploads this audio to FTP and tweets it. Everything I do is with Python. Off topic, but I highly recommend if you're going to get involved in stuff like this, Python is the way to go, in my opinion. And then, you know, that's great that people can go and see the radio, but really we want to be able to onboard that information in an easily readable format. So hopefully we get the audio from this video, but this is the initial tweet.
143023 requesting 2 to 1 south, route 4.
By a user.
1-4 approved.
And then we would respond with a map that automatically highlights all the routes described in that transcription. And if a call sign was included, it also gives you the operator associated with that call sign. So this is at UFOs of DC because there's so much traffic on this DCA radio channel that Twitter actually kind of thinks it's a spam bot, which causes some problems, but it operates fine if you follow it or go there individually at UFOs of DC. So here's what it looks like, because I know you guys will be interested. One of our friends very helpfully volunteered to host this on the 11th floor of an apartment building that overlooks DCA over here in the upper left. You can see some of the runway. I believe he can see the tower. That's not what this is. This is actually a restaurant, I believe, in the top of this building. But he should have a pretty good line of sight to the tower. And as you can see inside the box, it's power supply, a Raspberry Pi, and an RTL SDR. We have since upgraded this to an AirSpy HF Plus. And the title of this slide was $200 in a waterproof box. It was actually probably closer to 100 when in this form. The AirSpy HF Plus is $200. And then unfortunately, Raspberry Pis have doubled and tripled in cost because of the chip shortage. So that, it hasn't been a limitation for us. Thankfully, we beat it to the punch there. But the last piece here, because this box could totally be your ADS-B ground receiver alternatively, but this antenna is specifically tuned to DCA towers band at 134.350, and it's made by SmileyAntenna.com, and I highly recommend them for niche antennas. So this is the last slide, and it's a bit of a mess, but I want to ask this to you guys: is this ethical or legal? And here are some opinions I've gotten so far. This was someone on Twitter who told me she's the fiance of a Air Force first helicopter squadron Huey pilot. And they constantly complain about my account, which honored me a little. And says if the radio, they use codes on the radio, and if the radio is discovered, it could put them at risk. So I responded to her, thank you very much. I appreciate your concern, and our airmen and their safety is very important to me. And this is a real thing, no doubt. This was, not in any way related to divulgence of radio, as far as I know. But one of these helicopters was shot over Virginia a year or two ago. And this is a concern, but in my mind, what I want to do is weigh the value of the public good to the risks of divulging too much information. On the left, we have the FCC guidelines for what is not forbidden, certain types of interception and disclosure, which includes basically unencrypted radio, things on a radio scanner, divulgences of broadcast ships and aircraft in distress, transmissions on amateur radio. So I think we're well within the bounds of the FCC regulations to share this, and liveatc.com would be in big trouble if we weren't as well. And I hope that, taking information from concerned citizens and creating a map of it, I would believe is well within my First Amendment right. I wanted to mention at this time that one of my early jobs or recent jobs was at the Newseum in Washington, D.C., which is a big purveyor of the First Amendment, and sitting in on numerous talks with journalists and government whistleblowers has really created an ethos that I want to carry through in this project, but responsibly, which is why I'm happy to have this discussion with you guys in particular. Here's another article about gangs eavesdropping on police radios. They say that in one case, officers pursuing a suspect on foot overheard the suspect listening to the pursuing officer's radio transmission on a smartphone. Little hard to believe. And the founder of RadioReference.com did say the reality is that there's 30 to 45 seconds of delay, and that length is an eternity in a foot pursuit. Likewise, anything that we do is going to be 3 to 5 or more minutes off of real time. So if the concern is that someone would see data about a helicopter passing over them, which we couldn't say for sure that it's going to, and then do something nefarious, I would argue that you could get much better information being on a hill with a spotting scope. So weighing the public good and the risks, and then of course, military helicopters in the DC area have not had such a great reputation as of late. So there is a lot of interest in the public good of documenting and reporting what these operators are doing. Here's another example where the Park Police were found to have wrongly used a helicopter to chase ice skaters, one of my friends, off of the reflecting pool in DC. So, you know, I think there's room for oversight here. And as far as I can tell, the FAA is not the one that's going to be doing it. So here are some guidelines I came up with for myself. I don't want to use automation or overuse automation to bring data onto the platform. Of course, we automatically bring in radio calls, but not using like automated cameras or automatic transcription of those radio calls. It could be very error prone. It also doesn't have the editorial ability to discern whether this is in the public good or not. And, you know, by that token, I believe that the spots being voluntarily submitted, there's shared journalistic interest and liability with the spotter and me being, you know, bringing data onto the platform, but allowing them to decide what is important and not. So, you know, I had another legal example I wanted to share here of this was in 1997, there was actually a wrestling commentator who shared something and was sued for defamation. And the Court of Appeals, when he tried to use journalistic shield, the Court of Appeals defined what a journalist is. And so they said the intent to use this material sought, gathered, or received to disseminate information to the public, and that such intent existed at the inception of the news gathering process. As long as everything I do is public, I believe that I will be in the right in most cases. In addition to that, I want to provide clear documentation and kind of chain of custody, if you will, of data. There's way too much speculation happening in the news environment right now, and at every chance possible, I want to send people to a first source. So I put in the parentheses here, this is a website Hypothesis that lets you annotate PDFs. So I use this frequently. For example, the GAO, Government Accountability Office, published a very detailed report. It's very readable. I recommend everybody check it out. But the appendix is by far the highlight because they tell you every operator over the DC area, including military and law enforcement, and how many of what type of helicopter they use. And I can directly link to that PDF through Hypothesis, which I think is just a real value to people in getting out of sourcing correctly. So yeah, and then weighing risk versus the public interest is important to me. So this is an open prompt to you guys to tell me if you'd sue me or not. Let me know what you think, and here's my information if you'd like to check out more. Happy to open it up to questions now.
This is David, W2LNX, and you said the right words before that you're interested in getting your ham license. So guess what? We're starting a class, a Zoom class, March 19th, and I took a screenshot of your email address. So you'll be getting an email from me. Now, if you're asking hams to comment on the legalities of what you're doing, we could tell you all about Part 97. That's, what is that, Title 4, Chapter CFR 47? No, Alex, help me out with this. Part 97. We could tell you about that.
I'll find it.
ecfr.gov. It's a wonderful site, the latest and the greatest. Anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. Other questions? Come now, please.
Yeah, is the chat open?
I think that everybody's muted. Do people know how to use the reactions thing? Raise your hand. Yes, there we go. John, over to you.
Yeah, hi. I was reading some articles. Some people were talking about not specific to helicopters or anything like that, but using direction finding techniques using, I think, something called Karabas under Linux. Is that something that's been considered, or does that create legal issues?
Let me ask you to elaborate on that. Direction finding techniques, do you know, is it like radar?
Well, in direction finding techniques, you're taking 3 or 4 different readings, right? So if you're parked on a helicopter frequency, you don't have the ADS-B, and you may not have visualization on it, but you're able to zero in on the signal location using direction finding techniques. So the Karabas, I think it's an open source 4 antennas. So it would allow you then to say, hey, okay, so we hear a helicopter, we don't know where it is, but using direction finding techniques, hey, we've located over, this area. Now you can go take a look at the map, and maybe somebody could spot it from there. I don't know. It depends how granular you want to get, but there was an article in reference to using that for beacon location and plane down, but there's no reason you wouldn't use this to capture, radio traffic and find out where it's coming from.
Yeah. So I do know a little bit about that, as well as I've read a little bit about passive radar, which you can do on a RTL SDR. I think it would only cloud the really good sources that we brought online, as well as the fact I think there is some danger when we get to that level. So there have been radio enthusiasts who have reached out to me and said, like, DCA tower, great, have at it, that's awesome. Stay away from the military frequencies that are still unencrypted, because if you start bringing those online, they're going to encrypt them, and we don't want that. Now, the validity of that argument based on, they want that information for private use, and I would be trying to bring it to public. Is one thing to consider, but another is, there could actually be danger. I think in the encrypted frequencies, I have, it has passed through my brain that you could set up a couple ground stations and know by the gain level of these encrypted frequencies when they key in what operator is up and how far they are from these ground stations. But as well as being, not bringing more clarity to the situation, I think there is possible risk associated with that, especially encrypted frequencies being, even if you're not decrypting them, I think you're in a gray area if you were bringing encrypted, triangulated radio online.
Okay. But, if you were a spotter and you were standing up on a hill and you got a good location, you got your binoculars and you can see a helicopter going by and you can hear them talking air traffic control, you may not have ADS-B squawking, but you have a visualization. The guy's in front of you and you can see him flying by. I've done that in, New York City Harbor. There's an air pad there and helicopters are coming and going. And if you listen to their frequency, you can get a tail sign, and then you can say, oh, okay, that's the guy who just came across now and he's talking right now and he's looking to land and, going back and forth. So from a helicopter spotting point of view, it's pretty well not illegal. I guess the question becomes around the dissemination of certain information, right? So which you guys covered off. So I'm just looking at it from a hobbyist or technology perspective. But great, thanks a lot.
Another thing I told that military wife is that if they want to keep their location a secret, they're going to have to get quieter helicopters.
Okay, any more questions for Andrew?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Louis.
Yeah, hi, Louis here. Yeah, I realized that the coverage area of your service, if you will, is basically, I think, defined by the areas the volunteers are in. But just in general, what is what's the extent of the coverage area?
Yes, so I have that map somewhere, but not easily accessible. It does go fairly far out west because we've had a lot of interest from people as far as Reston. But then at the top, there are people who up 270, which goes kind of northwest, would have shown interest in doing it. But once you get up to, I'm forgetting the name, to create a square where I would be a valid coverage zone, it would also include parts of Baltimore, which is not at this time what we're doing. People have expressed an interest in making this like national, and to me, DC has the unique use case of needing this because of military, and we're pretty engaged with the Twitter sphere and wanting to know these things. And I think that a lot of the value really comes from the editorial that I'm following it. And I do a lot of video coverage of the reports that come out. I analyze the data, when January 6th happened, I was able to say, there was no military response in the air, things that you couldn't say from ADSB coverage. But if you don't have that editor, the New York area has also expressed interest, but a lot of their traffic is on ADSB, so it wouldn't be a unique value to them unless they had someone who really wanted to take the reins and be the local who would be the editor. So that hopefully answered your question.
So is Montgomery County fully covered?
I believe most of Montgomery County is.
How about as you go further to the west, like Frederick County?
Frederick might not be totally. I will try to bring up that coverage map, and I will try to bring it back up.
I mean, I was wondering about like there's an interesting spot near Thurmont, for example.
Yeah, someone has told me about Blue Mountain, or there's like a very popular military spotting spot out that direction.
I was referring to Camp David.
Oh yeah. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know if that crosses the line.
I was just wondering. I mean, obviously helicopters go there all the time. So
yeah, I think we get halfway there, but certainly not Camp David itself, I don't think.
Okay, just curious. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So Andrew, I have a question. Do you work at all with Homeland Security or any of the agencies with your work?
With my work, no. I have freelanced at FAA and for the Army on like 1 or 2 day basis. I think I might at this point have to make disclosures to them, were I to be invited to do any more gigs for that. But right now I work full-time for Yahoo Finance. So there's really not much of a conflict there. And that's been good. Yeah.
One more question before I hand it off to somebody else. Is you said that Tuesday was your busiest day. Why is Tuesday?
I can't say for sure. And that's part of not wanting to speculate. There are spotters who have said, oh, we know like Thursday is the day that they fly around the most. So it was interesting to get that conclusion actually. But the other thing is our data is voluntarily submitted. So at 2021.CopterSpotter.com, our annual report, we have a data disclosure here, much of which is borrowed from the NASA Aviation Safety Reporting System, the ASRS, which allows pilots to anonymously report incidents that happened without fear of creating a whole thing. So they're voluntarily submitted and thus cannot be considered a measured random sample of a population of like events. In short, if like the idiom would be, if a helicopter flies over the woods and no one's around to hear it, to CopterSpotter, it didn't happen. So, whether Tuesday is the most popular day for helicopters or the most popular day for helicopter spotting, the window is open there.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any more questions for Andrew? All right, well, great. Thank you again, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
It was a
Appreciate it.
terrific presentation, and wow, good luck with your Twitter account and all your work. It's fascinating, and please come back and update us.
Thank you.
All
And
right.
I'll look at the ham class.
All right. Thank you.